event. It is wonderful to see you all here. Who's excited to see Mr. Trymaine Lee tonight? Tonight marks just the third installment of an extraordinary fall season. Over the next several months, we'll welcome historians, artists, novelists, chefs, journalists, politicians, and more. We'll welcome a Supreme Court justice, a sitting United States congressman, and a former White House press secretary. There is quite literally something for every curious mind and for every member of the Philadelphia community. Tickets are selling fast, so please do register for these events at our webpage, freelibraryfoundation.org. I also want to say just a few quick words about our organization in general. Under the leadership of Monique Moore-Pryor. Where's Monique? She's here. The foundation works together with the Free Library to support programming and advance its mission of promoting literacy throughout the Philadelphia region. But as a nonprofit, and I can't stress this enough, we are reliant upon your support to achieve these goals. So please, if you can, do consider donating, which you can also do through our website, again, freelibraryfoundation.org. We are so grateful for your support. We are proud to present tonight's program in partnership with our media sponsor, the Philadelphia Citizen. And we'll also hear tonight from 3 local gun violence prevention organizers. And I think this program really captures the shared values and the shared priorities of both the Citizen and the Author Events series, promoting literacy, reading, and public engagement with ideas, not just entertaining stories, but also civic dialogue, and ultimately, civic participation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Roxanne Patel-Shepelavi, Executive Director of the Philadelphia Citizen, who will introduce tonight's program. Roxanne.
Hello, hold on one second. Just a little bit shorter. Hello, welcome everybody. As Daniel said, I am Roxanne Patel-Shepelavi. I'm Executive Director of the Philadelphia Citizen. Welcome, I'm so happy to have you here. For those of you who don't know the Citizen, we are a nonprofit media outlet that uses journalism that looks at solutions to our problems and calls to civic action as a way to bolster and revive democracy in the American city where it was born. That's this one here in Philadelphia. We do that on our website, thephiladelphiacitizen.org, through our podcasts and through events like this one and our signature Ideas We Should Steal Festival presented by Comcast NBC Universal, which we are bringing to the Comcast Technology Center for its 8th year on November 14th. I'll wait while you write it down. Got it? Okay, good. So we are super excited to co-host this event today with the amazing team at the Free Library Philadelphia Author Event Series. Can we give them another round of applause? So I just want to take a second to acknowledge the 24th anniversary of the attacks on 9/11 that killed thousands of people, as well as the horror of gun violence in America that is an everyday heartbreaking experience that we will be hearing more about this evening. So we have a little bit of an unusual event tonight for the library. You are all here, no doubt, to hear author, Pulitzer and Emmy Award-winning journalist, MSNBC contributor, and terrific reporter Trymaine Lee talk about his moving and expansive book about the generational impact of guns on the Black experience in America. As part of that conversation, Trymaine will start by doing what he does so brilliantly, interviewing folks who are trying to solve problems. He will be joined on this stage by Pastor Carl Day of Culture Changing Christians Worship Center, Tasnim Sulaiman from Black Men Heal, and Chantay Love from EMIR, Every Murder is Real. And then we will turn the tables and we'll bring up Citizen contributor and Evening Words host James Peterson to talk to Trymaine about his book, 1,000 Ways to Die. There will also be some time for questions from you near the end of the conversation. So with that, I bring you Trymaine Lee and guests.
How y'all feeling tonight? You feeling good? I see my family's here, so I know it's a good night for me at least. You know, it's always an honor and a privilege to get back to Philly, where in so many ways my story started. where I learned to be a reporter, and it shaped me in ways that I continue to experience as I move through the world as a journalist today. And I know you all came in part to celebrate, my new book. It's an honor to present that to you for the first time in Philly. But community has always mattered to me. And so when we had these conversations about a book stop here in Philadelphia, I wanted to make sure that the community was involved, right? Because so often, especially as a journalist, there's an exploitive kind of relationship here where there's all take, right, and no give. And I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to engage with people who are really in the community doing real work before we get to the conversation about my book and the broad impacts of gun violence in our community. So let's give up to our community organizers. So one of the core themes in the book is the costs of gun violence, right? What we all pay in so many ways. And I wondered if you guys could introduce yourselves, speak to the work that you do, but also from your vantage point, what are some of the greatest costs of gun violence are? We'll start with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited that we're here during this journey in time, because when you're in the gun violence business and work, time with each other is important. And so I'm Chantay Love from EMIR Healing Center, which stands for Every Murder is Real. And we do trauma-infused and trauma-responsive work to communities, as well as neighborhoods, as well as families, and different components of the city that has been impacted by violence, and helping them heal in an alternative way, not only mentally and emotionally, but how do you put the family back together?
Thank you.
Good evening, y'all. Pastor Carl Day of Culture Changing Christians, CCC. And man, outside of just pastoring Wednesdays and Sundays, I run a paid transformative program called Beat the Block, where we believe in building better men and businessmen. We take young black men from ages 18 to 26, the demographic that most people have already given up on or believe that there's no chance and they build prisons for, and we invest back in them. We believe that each man has purpose. We help them to turn their purpose into profit. We help get them employed. We keep them for 4 months. We have a curriculum that we walk them through to where they begin to embark on inner transformation, but then we also teach them the skills of entrepreneurship. And from there, we provide wraparound services even after they leave us. We cultivate their businesses, we invest in their businesses, and we teach them how to become better men, fatherhood, and we also teach brotherhood. We reconstruct and deconstruct those elements so that they're not just businessmen or they're not just employees, but they really become whole and they become better men. So I just know that was my experience. I know you asked the other part about the cost. And
We can get to that.
okay, cool. All right, well, shut up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tasnim Sulaiman. I'm the founder and executive director of Black Men Hill, and we are a nonprofit organization that provides free 99, free therapy to Black men. We center Black men in our mission very intentionally, age 18 and up, and we give them 8 free therapy sessions and pair them up with clinicians of color, and also pair them up with people that they're likely that we use 8 variables to pair them up with people they're likely to have a good therapeutic relationship with. So we do that, and we also have a gun violence program, a gun violence group therapy program as well. We work with reentry, and our work is very related to this as well, because I think mental health is often centered in the topic around gun violence, and it should be, because we will treat the physical wound, but not the psychological wound. And that's why I'm excited to be here. And because so much of your book talks about this, is like the psychological toll of trauma that we all experience from being exposed to gun violence every day in this country.
Taz, I want to stick with you because you brought up that point of the mental health cost to this. There are many costs that we pay. Sometimes it's your freedom, your life, your limb, but there's also that mental component. How does that actually look in community when folks are paying that kind of price for gun violence?
Yeah, it's really intense, because especially the work that we do with Black men who don't often even recognize when you are dealing with or like surviving through all of the traumas we survive through every day, like trauma, like it becomes almost like the norm. Unfortunately, like when we turn on the news and we look at things, it's like, wow, this is crazy, but at the same time, we all just keep going. And we don't recognize that the toll when you're constantly being exposed and ingesting trauma, like the cost that has on you, your family, your children, your relationship, your children's, that is what causes intergenerational trauma, and that causes a whole community of people who are not healed from that. And trauma also contributes to the cycle of retaliation and impulsive thinking. So like if you think about trauma, like the way it affects our brain, there is a part of our brain that is like the fight, flight, or freeze. And because we are exposed to violence so much, it makes us fearful. And when we're fearful and when we're traumatized, we're also extremely reactive, because it's like that part of your brain is like, oh, there's an emergency. So like we were just sitting out here just now before we went back, and something dropped back there. And we was all like that just happened. Like that just happened. And me and Chantay was like, oh my God, we're all on edge. And that's what trauma is. It's the trauma of, we're all on edge. And so everybody believes, oh, I have to have a gun because I have to protect myself. So everybody is operating from survival mode. And when you're operating from survival mode, violence is very highly likely to happen because people are, oh, okay, I have to fight or like for my life. And so I think it's a really expensive toll that we don't often give enough attention to.
And Pastor Day, in that space that she's speaking to, where everyone is so coiled up and sometimes you're hyper vigilant and everybody's on edge, how do you bring in this notion of faith when that faith can be challenged when folks look outside and they see the bloodshed and they see no one doing anything to really stop it? How do you engage with the idea of faith in that space?
That's a great question. So, actually, one of the things tattooed on me, there's quite a few, but one of the things tattooed on me is actually a scripture out of James. Talks about faith without works is dead, and we have to show people our faith by our works. And that's where, once upon a time, I was a guy who was out on street corners and preaching at people, and it was like, you know what, man, we have to show our faith by our works. We have to get out and really be able to invest in young people, show them that in spite of what they see, they can actually become something else, where they still can aspire to do what it is that they hope at one point to become. And that's the thing. A lot of the byproduct of the violence is due to the lack of investment in those families. It's due to the lack of opportunity, the lack of hope, because nobody created tangible opportunities. So what we've seen was, and I typically tell funders or anybody else, do cost benefit analysis. How much is it costing to put a man in jail? How much does it cost to send a man through a trauma ward? And how many multiple surgeries people have to pay for? And when merely through the work that we do, we asking them to put $8,000 into one man. See what we can do with a man over a 4-month span, just for merely just offering them opportunities. So because we consistently cared and showed people how we've cared, those things reignited the faith and the belief that people had back into people who are people of faith. Because otherwise, if we're waiting for, somebody to experience getting shot to say, hey, now I need Jesus, let me go limp into the church, how many people do we lose because of that? So literally, that's how I've been able to see, a great, tremendous amount of faithful results, because we were consistent in just getting out and literally doing. And I think that if we stay in our homes, if we stay behind our phones and we don't be active, we run the risk of becoming a soulless, post-faith society. So that's I say it definitely has, deterred a lot of people from faith and from hope, because we haven't been the vessels that we're supposed to be used by God. So, yeah.
So the most powerful part of faith is people seeing you actually walk the walk in front of your faith.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like that's also, walks hand in hand with being consistent. What does it mean to be consistent in the lives of folks who might experience gun violence, but they're also experiencing the inconsistencies and failures of every other system, right, that they put faith in? What does it mean to be consistent in that space?
What it means, not only for myself, but all of my community partners, is not only showing up, but also producing, but also walking alongside even when it's difficult. That never giving up and telling someone who has been exposed to this level of violence of what your life, how you want your life to be, is obtainable. Nobody wants to be shot. No one wants to be poor. No one wants to be homeless. But if after this experience, if I can help me and my team infuse the best of emotional support and also real life resources, because we can't say Like if Pastor Carl, someone's working with him, he needs the real life resources to help them produce and believe, because everything has failed them. But they gotta believe, and to believe again, they sometimes, if they're fortunate, if I say it's unfortunate that they see us, but it's fortunate that we're in part of their life, then we can help them walk to the place of belief, to hope, and to also to change. And that requires time, resources, and a commitment that some folks are not willing to do. Some folks are not willing to say, let's invest in the human being. And in investing in a person means our return is a better society. Everyone don't want to do that. But to invest in them also means to be consistent, committed, and not to say we need to be committed for 5 minutes. If we need to be committed, if someone has been exposed to violence, and we need to be committed until that act of violence and that the imprint of that pain no longer takes over their life. Let's do that. And let's change that. Let's have the courage to say, guess what? As a society and a community group, as a group, we're going to invest in this, and we're going to do it until we see zero violence. And then when we see zero violence, we see zero residue of the violence that had already been exposed to. Can we do that? Yeah, we can. But it takes people like us, it takes people like you to say, this is where we need to go, and we won't stop until we get there.
Well, let me ask you to that point. I've heard a lot of philanthropy. Yeah, let's give it up. Let's give it up. A lot of times I've had enough exposure to philanthropy circles, and there's a lot of talk about always scaling and scaling. You need to drive it down to zero. But as we know, saving one life, one family on a block, 2 families, that changes generations, right? How do you get that through the funders who say, hey, we want an ROI, we want a return on investment? How do you navigate that? And whoever,
This that
Pastor,
trauma-
you
this that
mentioned-
trauma
This
we're
is the
talking
trauma
about.
that we all experience up here. Word.
The trauma
We
talking about.
fight that question. I think we all fight every single day. Do we not?
Yes.
Of trying to, especially in the climate that we're in right now, we all have diversity initiatives, and they're all trying to be abolished. So yes, that is happening. But every day of trying to explain to people how it is, you talk about like the slow burn of violence, right? And it's like healing and trying to do these solutions. Like when people are trying to scale is a rapid thing, right? But it is really like the slow nurturing, attending to one person at a time that really actually helps make the difference. And it's very hard to sustain the work that we do because so many of our funders are really about scalability as opposed to sustainability.
So I just want to say to your point, and that's a great point, you nailed it. And I think that too often, no disrespect to funders, but too often they don't understand or have the cultural competency to understand the context of places that we come from. So to your point, it could be that one family, right, that you change. And I always typically tell people it only takes 5 rascals to destroy a zip code. You can have 5 people shooting at 2 different sides of that neighborhood, and everybody's in the house. And like, for instance, I mean, we take 40 young men at a time. And while we've probably served over 200 men in the last 3 years, people hear homicide numbers in 1,800 shootings and don't understand how the magnitude of those 200 we reach. I mean, we've gotten projects to squash beef because if anybody knows the streets, you might have 14 guys as part of a crew, but only 3 of them are real shooters. Multiple people got guns, but it's only about 3 real shooters. So now when you reach those who really have the influence, and you get them to chill out and say, it's cool because I got a job, I'm actually starting the business, I built credit up in a matter of a month. The others are breathing a sigh of relief because they like, good, I didn't really want to be out here with this gun and I wasn't trying to go to jail to die. Now it's cool to chill out. So funders have to understand that this isn't a soccer program where you can just say, hey, we got 400 kids gathering. And not to knock that, that's beautiful, but you can do both. But you do have to understand, A, the value of each life and how it traumatically impacts people. For a man who had 100 years of gun violence impacting his family, and to the people that y'all reach who are the victims and co-victims. But we also have to understand the value of those key individuals that can literally make that whole neighborhood safer if we put them in a position to win. And that's a day-to-day difficulty. And I'm like losing hair that I don't have, trying to prove that the funders.
You're getting patchy.
Oh man, patchy and all of that. You know what I'm saying? But I got to prove that the funders that it's still worth investing in, because they don't see big numbers. Like, this isn't a movie theater. This isn't, a business. This is something that's tangible and real. So you got to literally sell that. So that's phenomenal.
Chantay, I know this is triggering, right? But how do you navigate this?
Yeah, it's activating us. So EMIR, we use the word activate instead of trigger, so it activates a lot of us. I think that what happens is trying to navigate the system and trying to navigate philanthropy to understand that the one life is important, the family is important. I think that they want a fast return. They're looking at an investment as buying a stock and purchasing a property. And instead of investing in human beings. And if I invest in human beings, then that's not a time limit. That's actually saying I'm going to commit to correct the flaws of a system that helped us get here, to change it. And that means that I'm going to invest that amount of money. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm not going to do this and that it's taking too long. What you're going to say is that you're doing it the right way, and what you're seeing is life. And that the idea of having less blood on the streets and less death. We are so inundated with death that the basic ability to have a classroom and a young person actually learn, we're talking about basics. And that if we can't get to the schools, for the schools to be safe, the neighborhood, for the child to go through the school, to go to the school, to be safe, to not be activated, so that by the time they get to fifth period is the only time they're calm enough to learn something, then we've impacted the school system, their education system. We're talking about changing the whole community. And I want philanthropy to say, I got the courage to do that. I got the courage to say, I'm going to stick with my brothers and sisters to help change a whole neighborhood, because I've seen the devastation that one act of violence has destroyed a whole block. We see it, we read it, we feel it. We unfortunately smell blood. And we don't want to smell blood anymore. We don't want that. We want all the things that every parent wants when they give birth to their child, and they're thinking about possibilities. And philanthropy has those same things, those same possibilities that they know they can afford to have. We want to just have the environment to have a chance. They don't have to be wealthy, but have a chance.
But the issue to that is when they want rapid results, historically, the two things that is most easiest to invest in is incapacitating a person, putting them in prison, and then also displacing people. See, the idea is to go ahead and make that investment. Oh man, you price them out and you send them to prisons, not realizing they leave the children behind, who ultimately become what? Now they're triggered. Now they're responding out of trauma. Now nobody's raising them. And then guess what? 8 years later, they'll blame that mayor, but that 8-year-old is now 16 and responding based off his or her trauma.
Mm. And for the sake of time, and I would love for you guys to keep it relatively tight, but I think it's an important point to end on. There are a lot of us who will be home, either live in communities where there's violence, or you turn the news on and you're reading about the violence, another young brother's killed, and there's 5 over here and 3 over there. But you guys are doing the tough work, and we know that you could save one life and it changes a generational line. But what does it take to save that life? What has been working? What has been working on each of you in your own space, in your own capacities? What's been working to save lives?
Yeah, as far as what Pastor Carl was saying, criminalization is not the answer. It really is not. But I mean, I could speak to, what the work that we do and why it's so important for mental health to be a very central part of the solution of gun violence, is because it really helps to decrease impulse control, right? This is going to directly help, helping people to stop and think and reflect, in the part of their brain, as opposed to the part of the brain that you have to be in to be able to pull out a gun and shoot is the part that is extremely traumatized. It's the part that is the amygdala of the brain, the fight, flight, or freeze. And so what really helps is investing in the healing. So investing in what does it look like to heal our communities? What does it look like to help people heal the trauma that lives in their body? Because all of the traumas that we ingest, it lives in our body. So when something happens and we're triggered, we're reactive in it from that sense. We're going to stop and react to that. And so while we're right now with the while we're healing is a big part of that, and decreasing impulse control and regulating emotional nervous systems is really important as well, and helping people to process all the trauma that they've been through. One of the things we just recently realized in our data was that even though 98% of our men have experienced trauma, when you ask them how many have experienced trauma, only 27% of them say they have. So there is also a disproportionate amount of our ability to recognize what is really impacting us, because for them it's just like, oh, this is just life. Oh yeah, I got shot last Tuesday. Like, yeah, I mean, at least I'm alive. So that's not traumatic. I've had clients, I'm a therapist, so I've had clients who don't even recognize them being shot as a trauma. And so what it takes is being able to educate. Education is part of it. Healthcare systems, investing in healthcare systems and investing in healing solutions. And it doesn't just have to be therapy, but it's also programs like what Pastor Carl does and what Chantay Love does
Let's
as well.
get to that, Pastor. What's been working for you?
I'll be brief and just sum it up. Valuing these men, showing them that we value them. And that's why we kind of lead and let them know that, hey, we really want to invest in you to build you up. Be consistent in that. Because when we always say that a man that doesn't value himself doesn't value anything or anyone around him. So the community changes when we show them, no, I value you that much to bring you through, pay you for your time, build you up. So now you realize you have something to live for. These guys leave with, LLCs, businesses. These guys leave with jobs. They actually have a credit profile and they have a future to look forward to, and are no longer now devaluing that life and throwing that life away.
Chantay.
And I would say not only investing in them, but what works is at EMIR, not only the healing components of working, but the wraparound services that's added to it. It's not only just our mental and emotional support, but being able to connect them to employment, connect them to education pieces. It's rebuilding a whole family. It's the father, it's the mom, it's the aunt, it's the uncle, it's my mom, it's the children. It's saying, listen, we're going to be intentional. You have been exposed. The whole entire family has been exposed. So let's serve the entire family and do them all together so that we can hopefully capture some devastation and do a trauma responsive way so it changes for them.
I want to thank y'all for the work that you do, even when it goes unheralded and you don't get your flowers and you don't always have the resources. I know, and it shouldn't be like this, but people like y'all are putting in the hard work without the resources. And so those closest to the problem got the solution. And so we know with the right resources you could do your thing, but you're doing it without that. And I want to thank y'all. And so let's give it up for people putting in real work. Thank you. Now, it's my pleasure now, thank y'all for real, to introduce a scholar and a gentleman, James Peterson, who is a fine journalist and academic and all-around good brother I've known for years, and it's an honor. Let's give it up. It's an honor to be here with you, brother. And I have to say, I'm not always used to being on this side of the questions.
I'll be gentle, big brother.
I don't believe you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm honored to be here. This is a powerful book. This is a powerful book. And Trymaine, thank you for the work. Thank you for your honesty. I don't want to cause any journalism wars or writer wars, but I read a lot, and there are a lot of folks who have written about this subject matter. And sometimes I come away feeling hopeless from that. There are a lot of things that are hopeless in here, but I come away from this with an abounding sense of hope and honestly pride for your family. Shout out to your family, because this brother is doing something that a lot of writers, journalists, authors, speakers are unable to do, which is thread the needle of the most complicated issues for Black culture in America, and survive it. So I could gush all night, but let's get
Thank
to
you, brother. It means
to
a lot, so I
it's a
appreciate
great book. Everyone should buy it. All right. There are at least 3 different elements of the book. It's part memoirs we've talked about. It's deeply reported journalism, and it's historical. And like you, I have a very private family, so I do want you to talk a little about the family piece of it. But you don't have to answer anything here that you don't want to. They can read the book if they want to, right?
Which they should anyway.
That's right. But part of what you do is you map the trajectory of violence within your own family to help us understand what this journey has been like for you. And so I kind of want to start in that early part. If you could talk a little bit about Cornelius, to give our audience a sense of how far back you go and what the historical context is for some of the other narratives that we experience in 1,000 Ways to Die.
Thank you. So this is stop number 2 on the tour. We were in New York City last night, and I've been having conversations with folks for the last couple of weeks about this book and about my family. And so I have a stream of tears that have been sitting. I didn't even start yet. In trying to get my arms around what my people who I love and help shape me, the violence that they've experienced, what it was like for my grandmother to experience the losses that she did, and my aunts and uncles and mother, the experience that they did. But it goes back even further than that. This book didn't initially set out to be this super personal exploration of my own family's experiences alongside America's. It was a very different book. But what it became was so much more important. And I learned a lot about some of the things that I was wrestling with, and also the grief that I know my family has experienced. I always grew up knowing about the murder of my grandfather in 1976, a couple years before I was born. And I didn't have the privilege of knowing him, or getting my arms around him, or going fishing with him, or hearing the stories. I always knew that absence, right? I knew the weight that it put on my family. But as I investigated further to best understand how violence has shaped all of us, including my family, I learned about the first murder in my family back in 1922 in Jim Crow, Georgia, rural Jim Crow, Georgia, where my grandmother's older brother, he's 12 years old, named Cornelius. And my great-grandparents were tenant farmers, which meant they worked land they'd never owned, right? They worked hard to put food on the table on land they never fully owned. And around settlement time, which is the end of the year, when everything, basically that's when the landowners rip you off. Basically, that's what happens every single year. That's part of the process. That's right. He was sent off to run errands, and he ended up being shot and killed in a sundown town nearby. Now, how many of you have heard of sundown towns? You've heard of that? I studied this stuff, and I always still thought it was colloquial, like it was something that you say, like this is a bad place. You don't want, if you're Black, you don't want to go there because the rumor has it that bad things will happen. Well, something very bad did happen to a 12-year-old boy, Cornelius Woods. Soon after that, my family joined the migration, first to Philly and then South Jersey. Like millions of other Black families fleeing the violence of the South, but also the economic violence of the ripping off, the partial citizenship, the violence of being kind of American, kind of, but not full Americans. As Jim Crow was settling in even further, and the violence that accompanied that, the lynchings. So you seek the solace of the North. First to Philly, then South Jersey. Then another of her brothers was killed by a state trooper, McClinton Woods, Clint. And when you read the newspaper headline, as striking as if you read what happened to Mike Brown of Ferguson, trooper's gun kills youth. Right? The gun just happened to kill the youth.
And Clint was just at his place of business. It was
Right.
late, but he was at his
Right.
place of business, working on a car, maybe doing where he's supposed to be doing,
Right.
where he's supposed to be
And
doing
it
what he's
gets,
supposed to be doing.
I'm gonna save the details because it's even weirder. The whole context of the killing, and it defies reality. And then 20 years later, we get to my grandfather's killing, and then a stepbrother was murdered in '96. And as I wrestled with some of that early on, but still trying to do what we do, pushing forward, until I fully had to try to get my arms around what it means to carry grief, what it means to carry the weight of death. We're talking about how one death can shape and reshape a family. What did that do to my great-grandfather? I was talking to my uncle Gary for this book, and I was asking, he was a young man, and talking about how stoic his grandfather was until McClinton was killed. And in the church, sobbing. A man who fled to the Jim Crow South and experienced the white supremacist violence of the South to arrive in New Jersey, right, and find more of the same. What does that do, right? To faithful people, what does that do? To black people who had to rely on nothing but our faith, right, and our will, what does that do? And so in the exploration of this book, understanding the broad impacts of violence on black people, my family story tracks along the same way, these major historical points. Going from the Jim Crow South, joining the migration, finding a new kind of freedom in the North, but then also racism and violence with a different accent, right, in the North. And then we get to, into the 90s and the drugs, and we get into those spaces. And it felt, what I always wanted to do was hold the reader's hand and walk you through this story.
You did that, brother.
And that's what I was trying to do.
You did that. You absolutely did that. There's a portrait of that you think through and think about in the book with your grandpa Horace and your family. Talk about that portrait a little bit. Because one of the things you do in your writing is Trymaine's going to make you see the things he's writing about. So you're going to read the words, but you will see you'll see the people, you'll see the faces, you'll see the details. Yeah. You do that with this portrait of your family.
Yeah. There's this concept I learned a long time ago in writing, and I didn't deploy it here, but it is what it is. It's like an object correlative. It's an object that correlates to a thing or a feeling or an emotion, right? And as a young child in my grandmother's house, I would look up and I would see this family portrait taken a few years before my grandfather was killed. And my family looked so good. It looked so good. My uncle, oh man, come on. The collars, the military uniforms, and I know each and every one of them. And they just look so good. And I'm seeing this family that was whole, right? Not a perfect family, but a whole intact family. You see my grandmother and my grandfather and my aunts and uncles and my mother is on the side, and you see it, and they're young, and there's so much ahead of them, and not knowing then what would happen to their father. But when I see that, I imagine, those times when they were laughing and cooking, and the story. You hear the story because there were some characters, right, in the family, and hear the stories about the characters and this idea that they were just a whole family that I've never known.
I want to move forward a little bit at least in the chronology of the narrative. By the way, folks, it may sound like there's some spoilers here. You can't spoil this book.
It's the journey. You got to take the journey. You got to take the journey.
I loved Palmer's, the Palmer's Club on Spring Garden. Right, we're old enough to remember when that was there. But one of the scariest moments in the book for me, as someone again who again, we've known each other for a long time, but in reading your words, and I did some audio too, hearing your voice, the kindred piece was very strong. But one of the scariest moments for me in the book, and the book has a lot of scary moments in it, was when you're sitting with that gun in your lap outside that club. Tell that story. That's a Philadelphia story. Tell that story.
So my brother and I, who I'm seeing right now in the audience, it was one of those times, and I describe it in the book, where my brother's a few years older than me. But it was the first time I felt like we were hanging out. And
you were with the big boys.
For a couple of years, it was like we just starting to, getting older. And this moment spoke to how quickly things can change. There was an altercation between a family friend and a stranger, where the stranger pulls out a gun. And our friend also had a weapon. And he tossed it in the car and was trying to get out of there. And we followed behind. And I knew in that moment, in that position, I would have shot to protect our friend, right? That's one of my brother's homeboys. But everything could have been different for me in an instant, right? It doesn't mean that I have some innate violent tendency inside of me. It's a moment that countless young people find themselves in. And it was a scary moment for me. And I don't think we might have talked about it once if we ever really talked about it.
You're just not to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, that's why his name is Roger in the book. The guy's name is Roger.
I think you say his name is James.
Oh, I said James. I did say James.
But that's not his name.
James ain't his name.
No.
No. I would not put the good brother out like
Protect
that.
the alias.
Yes. Or us.
You're a good
us.
journalist, Trymaine.
Listen,
You're
man,
a good journalist.
At least I let it be known this wasn't his real name. I said James, not his real name.
That's right. You did.
But it was one of those moments, and it's also a coming of age moment where it happens countless times. And one, we shouldn't have had that gun in the first place. The other dude, none of these things should have been involved.
That's right.
At all.
That's right.
And
And
it was
over
sca-
something that's minuscule.
Well,
how
and the reality, and we were sitting there, so I remember seeing this, is some dude trying to holler at these girls. The girls didn't want it, and James, being a good brother that he is, was like, "Come on, y'all, stop! Come on, man,
leave him
stop!
alone."
Leave him alone."
Yeah.
yeah. That was
And
a scary
then-
moment.
Anyway, scary part of the book. Some of your reporting over the years has taken all of us through some of the most traumatic events for collective Black America. And part of what the book is wrestling with, that I'm still wrestling with, is how do those of us who talk about these things every day or write about these things, how do we process and manage that? But one of the outlets, I want to talk about your own health is before we get out of here too, but one of the outlets for me is some of your deep reporting on some of these systems. I wish we had more time to really go into this, but I want you love Chicago.
Yeah.
You absolutely love Chicago as a city. But you understand it better than almost any writer. You understand it in a way as if I would have thought you were born and raised there. But talk about the migratory trajectory from Mississippi and Chicago, and how that in some ways has inflamed the gun violence problem in one of the great cities in this country.
So Chicago, to me, could be, in so many ways, a portrait of Black America. It's the perfect stand-in. And I'm not talking about the Chicago that people know for the gun violence. I'm saying the way that Black people arrived in Chicago reshaped everything we know about Black America. The politicians that would emerge experiencing their kind of political power for the first time, right? The music, the jazz infused from the blues, right? All the folk ways and food ways that folks brought up from Mississippi. Lest we forget, the way Black folks got to the North is you follow the old rail lines, and it's about geography. So if you're in Mississippi, you'll go straight up north and end up in Chicago or Gary, Indiana, or St. Louis. If you're from the Carolinas and Georgia, you'll go straight up the Eastern Seaboard and you'll find yourself in Baltimore, Philly, New York. If you're from Louisiana, you will go through Texas and get to California. And so that masses, millions of Black people who also arrived at the urging of the Chicago Tribune, right? One of the early Black press, right? To the Chicago Defender, the Chicago Defender, who was putting out an open call, leave the South, come to Chicago, right? So you have millions of Black folks. You have all the industry and manufacturing, so there were good jobs. But what they also found, and Dr. King would note this many years later, some of the most virulent racists that make the South, make them look like Boy Scouts. Illinois was vicious, Indiana, vicious, right? Once you get up there. And so you have all these Black folks, and they codified, they weaponized segregation like no other city in America ever has, in terms of coordinating Black folks into ghettos and drawing red lines around them so there's no value in their homes, they can't move in, can't move out. The deeds of covenants, where people would bake into their deeds that it cannot be sold to anybody that's Black, right? Hardening that kind of deep segregation and disinvestment, right? But Chicago, again, is also home to one of the biggest, especially during the migration years, one of the biggest Black populations in this country. But what you also get, many decades, is a city with super strict gun laws, right? All of those inequities and disparities, right? All the systemic violence, and then surrounded by states with super loose gun laws. And also what they call the iron pipeline back down to Mississippi, where in Mississippi, you could walk in and 15 minutes later have a gun and come back the next day and do the same thing, right? And so you have this collision of culture, but every system colluding against it, from its history and its lingering segregation and its impacts to the easy pipelines and plugins from guns and gun violence.
Yeah, no, it's just incredible work. One of the gun manufacturers that you spent some time reporting on is Smith & Wesson, and you talk about different individuals who worked at the factory when the home base was in Massachusetts, and I can't remember if it was Lewis or the other brother, but he asked this question. He ends up getting fired for this, but you talk about how Smith & Wesson rings certain bells in the Black community, and how the company may know that, may not know that, but ultimately doesn't care.
What fuels the gun industry is the fear of Black people, mostly. Let's just say it plain, mostly. Certainly there's something baked in about your American rights to, but it's,
gonna run up in your crib or run up on you.
the little known part about the modern gun rights movement is that it's a response to Brown v. Board of Education, right? That's where they really kick off. The NRA before was about sport shooting, right? And then as black folks started getting their freedom, it struck fear in the hearts of people. But the idea that in Massachusetts, when Smith & Wesson was there, this popular brand, every rapper knows it, it's a household name, that a world away from Chicago, a world away from Oakland, people are putting food on their tables, right? These are important industries in these communities. But the young brother who made the correlation said, I see my friends dying from this, and I hear it in every rap song, and we can't even mention it in the board meeting. You can't even mention it, right? Because there's this convenient ignoring, this convenient forgetting. Meanwhile, they're making billions in revenue unchecked. And mind you, you regulate cigarettes more than you regulate guns, right? The gun industry is largely unregulated. There's no cap on anything, no checks, So it's a terrible formula. In Chicago and cities like it pay the price.
Yeah, and again, you've covered these issues in many cities. One of them that was most formative for you was New Orleans. You were police. You call yourself a cub reporter when you're kind of getting your feet under you. But talk a little bit about what it was like to be in New Orleans, to be covering these stories pre-Katrina, and then to be there on the ground for Katrina. One of the things that's striking to me about the commemorations of 9/11 is like they read the names. There's so much ceremony, but I don't know if we see that. Actually, I don't see that for Katrina. And you're talking about thousands of casualties. We still don't even know how many people really died during Katrina. But you were reporting before then, and you had this moment of a brutal double homicide right before the levees broke. Talk a little bit about your experience in New Orleans.
New Orleans, like Chicago, is a city that you love, but it'll break your heart at every turn. We all recognize the destruction of the flood that happened during Hurricane Katrina, but there were floods that happened long before that. A police department long known for its corruption and its brutality, politicians that are as slimy as any you've ever seen. And I think that killing, though, brought a lot of it to bear. There was, I don't want to give too much away. I do want you to read the book. But this little girl was killed in a double homicide. And this is about 3 weeks before Katrina. And I went around the neighborhood talking to folks about what this killing meant. And a man on his porch said, the murder of that little girl is going to usher in a great flood. And I wrote that in the Times-Picayune newspaper. I quoted him, and it's in the paper. He said, that's too far.
It was too far for you, too.
It was too far for me. It stuck with me. A police source told me that the way that she was killed, you could tell that she was looking up at her killer when he did it. And it's one of those stories, like many others, as you're collecting this ribbon and thread of these stories and trying to find ways to humanize the experience and speak to all the violence and the unfairness of it all, that sticks with you. And that was just the beginning of what would be a wild time in New Orleans, where all of the rumors of the police abuses were true. They did kill people. Where you had white vigilantes actually killing people. You had black people trying to flee the storm across the bridge to Jefferson Parish, and you had parish police shooting over their heads to turn them back. You had atrocities that we'll never be able to put a name to. And as you mentioned, so many of those folks will never be fully recognized or respected.
Yeah, I can't believe we just got the time signal, but we are going to open up for questions.
Oh, we
here
just
shortly.
getting started.
Trymaine, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Darren.
Yeah.
It's hard for any of us, I think, to process what the data is on death by suicide in the Black community at this point. Again, all the data is here, folks. It's all in 1,000 ways that you report all that out. But talk about Darren. That hit home for you in a certain kind of way, and it just hits home because I think sometimes when we think about white supremacist violence and how white supremacy reinscribes our neighbor to neighbor violence, I don't think we always leave enough room or bandwidth for death by suicide and the mental health piece, which again in this book you You are deeply invested in what the psychic toll of
Yeah.
all this is. But share what you will about your friend and colleague, Darren.
I think one thing that's important to know about as you move through this book, and there's a lot of heavy stories and a lot of stories of loss, but the loss matters because of the love that we have in our humanity and the promise and the potential, not just the potential, our lived courage and our lived experiences. And so as we move through all these ways that guide us to early, sometimes violent death, right? What's under that and the pain is that there's love there. And my good brother, Darren, who took his life during the pandemic, good brother. I mean, a journalist, the real deal. Oh, that was my guy. I helped him get the Times-Picayune, and we were fast friends ever since. He's been on my birthday. That was my brother. And I don't know exactly what he was experiencing, but I understand what it's like to feel the weight as a black man. There's no one who loves us but us, kinda, and maybe black women. Black women love us. We have trouble loving ourselves sometimes, right? Because nothing in society signals that we are valued. Really, it's not. Not only are we missing, there's a violence in us being missing from the classrooms, as a teacher, as a student, from the medical, we're just missing. But where we are is incarcerated. Where we are is on the street. Where we are is in the grave early, right? And so the Darren chapter is about, and also part of that is telling young men, like, there's some pitfalls here. It's a setup. It's a setup. And half of the setup is understanding that's a setup in the first place, right? So young brother, even when it seems like a gun might actually protect you, because lest we forget, here's the problem. A young man goes outside and he sees people getting killed, right? When white folks are talking about guns for protection, nobody blinks an eye. It's your Second Amendment right? We understand the ecosystem, though, that exists when it's young and black and guns and all that deprivation. They're dangerous. But brothers, there are some trap doors here. And so be mindful of that, right? And the talks that we give our young men and our boys in particular needs to be one, as Pastor Carl said earlier, that affirms and fills,
Yes.
right? They say nothing stops a bull like a paycheck. Nothing stops a bull like some good self-esteem. That's going to keep you out of trouble, right? And it's not to put all of the onus on them, because, again, there's a system that colludes against them, right? But our conflict resolution skills, caring enough about yourself not to put yourself in harm's way for all of us. But also, how do we better equip black men to bear the weight of all this pressure? Because sometimes we crack and crumble under it. And unfortunately, I'll never know why my brother Darren took his life, but we lost a good one. We lost a good one.
Last question, we'll open it up. How are you feeling, bro? Talk to us a little bit about your health mentally and physically in this world right now.
Okay, despite everything you just heard, and all of the emotion, I'm in a spirit of gratitude. That's what I'm about to cry. I've been like this for probably a month
It's
now.
okay. I've been crying since I've been reading this book. I've cried all through this book.
Listen, I feel thankful to have made it. I am thankful to have been able to put some respect on my grandfather's name and my family's name, right? I feel very proud to be able to do that. I'm thankful for people who have shown so much support and believe in us and believe things can be better, who want to see the truth. We're painted as if they're from the president himself, talking about the threat to occupy cities. And he said, it doesn't matter 5 years, 10 years, these people were born to be criminals. These are his words. So we're only partially human and only partially deserving human respect and dignity, but we know better. Okay, so despite me getting angry a little bit, it is.
I feel that in my chest, bro. I feel that in my chest.
It is out of love, so I'm feeling really good. Health-wise, I'm feeling good. I've been doing all kind of projects, so I'm just tired. I ain't been working out the way I should. But overall, I'm feeling really good, man. I'm proud to bring 1,000 Ways to Die to the people and give my story to y'all. So it feels good.
Give it up for Trymaine Lee.
Thank y'all.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time for Q&A. There are people with microphones in the audience. Please wait till a microphone gets to you. Please, in the interest of getting through a few of these, have a question that you want to ask. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but have a question that you actually want to ask for Trymaine to answer. Just raise your hand, please, if you'd like for someone with a microphone to come with you because you already have a question you want to ask.
Hello. I'm curious about the panel you had originally and how we might get in touch with them.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure you get that. I think it also is important. Sometimes these issues seem really big, and there are people in your communities, in your backyard, who are equipped to handle some of the business that you don't have to turn too far. So
Yeah,
make
they're
sure
all
you-
right here too. If you want to, they're all sitting right over there. If you want to talk to them.
I see we have a few back here.
Appreciate you. I was just curious in the process of writing the book.
What's up, good brother?
Was good. What didn't make it into the book that you wish could have, but just you couldn't find the space? Editors doing what editors do. But can you speak to kind of what stuck out to you that couldn't make it into the book, perhaps?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, the first one is, I'm kind of a history nerd, right? So I'm like, give me all the history so I can understand the moment we're in. But to help the book move, like I couldn't have but so much, the guns for slave cycle. There's a part in the book where I speak to how European powers actually were fomenting more war on the continent to create more enslaved people, right? And I don't think people understand the psychic connection between black people and guns, because there were some of these folks that would only trade guns for humans. So there's that part that I had to shrink. The second one is I had a whole chapter. Have y'all heard Nas's I Gave You Power?
Yes.
Right, from his second album, where the gun has a voice, and so I did a whole thing with a I Gave You Power, and this whole thing about 90s hip hop and all that, and that just couldn't fit. That one couldn't make it.
I'm going to read you one of my favorite quotes from the book. One of my favorite quotes from the book, and I'm going to steal this, Trymaine, because I'm going to use this every time. One of the reply guys is like, "Why are you talking about cops killing black people when you should be talking about the violence in your own community?" Trymaine writes, "Community violence is a proxy for a kind of self-destruction seeded by white supremacy, where rage turns inward instead of striking at the systems that bind and oppress. It's more practical to lash out at those close enough to strike."
Yeah. I said, boy, who wrote that? I said, that boy good.
He wrote that, okay? Next question. Can we go to the front right here? Yes.
Hello. I'm curious. I was like extremely traumatized listening to this group as well as you speak about the traumas that we have to experience as we're trying to push forward. Could you share a little bit with us about the experiences you were having especially when you talked about the things that happened to your family? Like, what resources did you use, such as therapy, or what did you do to help you push forward to be able to continue to write this book? Because I know it had to be hard. Like, I'm feeling this just because of, the work I do in my church and in the community. So I just, would like to hear some of that.
Thank you for that question. In all honesty, and we didn't get much into, I had a heart attack. Okay, right. Before I got into this part of it, I had a heart attack, which forced me to examine the breadth of violence, blood clots and bullets, and the impulses that both come from, right? And how what we experience and what we're holding on to shape both of those things. And so I had to do a deep examination, and I had the heart attack 2 years into writing the book. And so I put the book away for like 2 years, like a year and a half. I didn't touch the book. I started meditating. I was getting mindful. People who follow me on social media, I'll be fishing. Seriously, no, I'm seriously trying to structure my life where that's kind of most of what I do. I'm serious because I find peace there, and it's quiet, and I had to not worry about anything but myself, and living mattered. And so I was approaching the toughest part of this material because that's what forced the book into a more vulnerable space. The book was some of this anyway. It was always going to be some of that. But by that point, I was already kind of tuned in and dialed in. I understood myself. I was breathing, and when I learned now that when I feel that kind of tension, I chip it up right there. I understand why I'm feeling like this. Let me breathe. Let me focus. Let me just remove myself and be easy. And I'm not talking to nobody. So I don't want to talk to nobody. So I just don't want to talk to nobody. Sometimes I got by myself, but that's part of my thing. And so by the time I got to the toughest parts of it, I was able to do that. Even though still there were some parts that it was hard for me. Again, talking about like my grandfather and like that kind of stuff was like, that was starting to get to me a little bit, but I was able to process it. I didn't feel any extra weight that I already didn't have. But the breathing, the practical, like, that was very helpful.
We have time for one more question because we do want to give this brother some time to sign some books that you all are all going to buy. We'll take it in the back, yes.
Thank you so much. I think I speak for all of us for you sharing your journey, your research, the transparency, and your passion, for sure. My question was similar to the person who just spoke before me. That near-death experience, of course, changed your trajectory in life and helped you complete that book. However, beforehand, as a person who has experienced trauma, I just would love to know your resources and support systems and your upbringing that help you heal and get through this process.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think early on, I didn't do a good job of addressing it at all. And so what I was doing was, even though I wasn't sleeping because I was stressed, I had stress playing in my head, it didn't really affect the way I moved, so I thought I was okay, like the way I engage with people. But we do what journalists do. You pour yourself further into the work, or you drink, or you just do everything but address, what's really going on. I come from a great family, so I always felt the love and support always, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've been able to just move how I've been moving because of who I'm from, and that was tremendous. But again, I didn't even have the resources, and I done made it through a lot, and I still didn't have. I've never went to therapy. I never. I have a good group of friends, so we could talk very openly and honestly with each other about what's going on, and that was very helpful.
You have a beautiful daughter who will keep you honest.
Oh,
too.
listen, my daughter Nola, that's my partner right there too. She's a good seed. She's a good one. But that does help because, especially as men, we want to be able to stand up for our family, and you want to be able to be a good example. And so having that relationship that I have a great relationship with her, does force me also to be as clear-minded and healthy as possible, because I also want to make sure that she sees a reflection of that, and that it's okay to feel, and we should feel. And in my household, again, she knows if you talk to Nola, she's on top of everything because we talk openly and honestly, so that you're not taken by surprise and you know how to handle these things. But you gotta find your center and peace wherever you can. Can we get one more? I know we said no. Is there one more?
Can we do one more?
Sorry.
We cannot. Yes, one more.
Yes, we can do one more, right?
Author's privilege.
My bad, man. I said, yeah, of course. Because I work here now, of course.
Yes,
Sorry, I do not work here, y'all. I do not work here. Don't let me get y'all in trouble. Oh, thank you very much. That's a great last question. So kind of intentionally, what I've been doing for most of my career is I'm trying to stitch together a big quilt of the Black experience and what it means to be Black and what it means to have survived this country. Because not how many of us they killed, it's how we survived it all is actually, I don't want to say it's a miracle. It's because of who we are. And so everything I've done, I've tried to show, and I try to show systems, right? I try to find vehicles, that speak to how do we engage with, what does it look like when we engage with the carceral system, so the police and all that. So maybe it is a Ferguson and how these laws and ABC and diversity. Is it how we experience living in places where the water and the air is more toxic? And so we go to these communities. And so it's trying to show, ultimately, and I guess I could say this as journalist, I'm supposed to be objective, but my biggest thing is, ain't nothing wrong with us, right? Ain't nothing wrong with us, right? If you want to understand what's wrong with us, let's look at everything built around us. So not so secretly, I'm trying to do what Arturo Schomburg, the great researcher, said was find convincing evidences of our culture. So I'm just trying to find convincing evidences. I just released my first independent documentary on Katrina called Hope in High Waters on Peacock right now. Thank you. And so I want to lean more into that space. So I've been in print, in digital, on TV, specials. I'm an author now. I'm a filmmaker now, and I think that visual medium, especially, that's the way most people are engaging, whether it's short form or long form. And so I hope to do more of that. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Trymaine Lee.
Thank you, my brother.
The book is 1,000 Ways to Die. We'll turn it over to Mr. Daniel Blank.
That concludes That concludes this evening's program. Thank you all so much for coming. A reminder that copies of this incredible book are for sale, courtesy of our partner bookseller, Uncle Bobby's, right up in the lobby. Yeah, give it up for Uncle Bobby's as well. And Trymaine has generously agreed to sign them. So let's get up there. Can we have one more round of applause?